Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. And thanks again for stopping by. I hope you had a great weekend. I'd like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Baloo for a lovely celebration on Saturday at the Capital Club. Very lively indeed. It was quite quiet upstairs, I found. But I think that's all to do with the alcove blow, maybe. Two links for the two Mindspeak sessions we've had this year. One, of course, was with Dr. Titus Naikuni of Kenya Airways. And the second, and actually the first Mindspeak session of the year was with Madame Christine Lagarde of the IMF. Home thoughts, I love this photograph. Bathers in Wave Pool, Orlando, Florida, 1999. Remind you of that interview I did with MG Vassanji, which I've uploaded onto YouTube, and what an interesting man he proved to be. And I've been going back to all his books and rereading them, particularly the short stories, which are rather fine and beautiful. Political reflections, Riek Machar. If it was not for the interference of the Ugandans, we should be in Juba now. The Ugandans saying, no, we have stayed where we are. Actually, we're not advancing ourselves. We just stopped the rebels from advancing southwards. But it's the government that has been fighting. And then South Sudanese rebels accused government forces on Sunday of razing the hometown of their leader Riek Machar, violating a ceasefire, and said the army was drawing support from foreign fighters now in the country. Rebel spokesman Lul Ruai Koang said government SPLA forces and fighters from the Sudanese Justice and Equality Movement, a rebel group from north of the border, had destroyed the northern town of Lear on Saturday, massacring women and children as they fled. President Kiir's forces burned down the whole of Lear town and entire surrounding villages, Koang said in a statement. The latest destruction of Lear town in Unity State has no strategic, operational or tactical importance, but mere need for psychological satisfaction. I'll put up a photograph of a general view showing the opening ceremony of the 22nd Ordinary Session of the African Union Summit in Ethiopia's Addis Ababa. Over the weekend, actually on Saturday, I read Robert Kaplan's Monsoon. I've been meaning to read it for a while. It's really very, very good. I'll just give you some comments out of it. The greater Indian Ocean, stretching eastward from the Horn of Africa past the Arabian Peninsula, the Iranian Plateau and the Indian subcontinent, all the way to the Indonesian archipelago and beyond, may comprise a map as iconic to the new century as Europe was to the last one. That's a good point, which I've been making as well. 40% of seaborne crude oil passes through the Straits of Hormuz at one end of the Indian Ocean, and 50% of the world's merchant fleet capacity passes through the Strait of Malacca at the other end. Kaplan adds the combined appetites of China, Japan, and South Korea for Persian Gulf oil already make the Strait of Malacca home to half of the world oil flows and close to a quarter of global trade. This creates a Malacca dilemma for China, as President Hu Jintao has termed it, and this is why China is embarked on its so-called string of pearls strategy, constructing a large port and a listening post at Gwadar near the entrance of the Straits of Hormuz, planning a railway line from Gwadar across today's Pakistan to Gilgit, and there to Kashgar in Xinjiang province, describes China's build-up of an oil port in Hambantota in Sri Lanka, a container port facility in Chittagong in Bangladesh, where China could see naval access. Mr. Kaplan writes that China is building and upgrading commercial and naval bases, constructing road, waterway and pipeline links from the Bay of Bengal to China's Yunnan province. This is crucial to China because such Indian Ocean ports with north-south road and rail links would help economically liberate landlocked in China. Some other quotes: whoever is Lord of Malacca has his hands on the throat of Venice. Indian Ocean accounts for 1/2 of all the world's container traffic. The Indian Ocean rimland from the Middle East to the Pacific accounts for 70% of the traffic of petroleum products for the entire world. China's demand for crude oil doubled between 1995 and 2005 and will double again in the coming decade or two as it imports 7.3 million barrels of crude daily by 2020. More than 85% of that China-bound oil will pass across the span of the Indian Ocean through the Strait of Malacca. Chinese oil consumption is growing 7 times faster than the US. US Marine Corps' Vision and Strategy Statement, unveiled in June 2008, covering the years to 2025, concludes that Indian Ocean and adjacent waters will be a central theatre of conflict and competition. The US may not control events inside the big sandbox of the Middle East, but as Ralph Peters suggested, will compensate by trying to dominate the doors in and out of the sandbox, the Straits of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. In other words, the Indian Ocean will be where global power dynamics will be revealed. Together with the contiguous Near East and Central Asia, it constitutes the new great game in geopolitics. I've been saying this for a while, and I wrote that piece in August 2013, where I said a sine qua non of President Barack Obama's pivot to Asia is US-NATO power projection over the Indian Ocean. Professor Felipe Fernandez Amesto explains why the precocity of the Indian Ocean as a zone of long-range navigation and cultural exchange is one of the glaring facts of history made possible by the reversible escalator of the monsoon. And I said, I have no doubt that the Indian Ocean is set to regain its glory days. China's dependence on imported crude oil is increasing, and the US, interestingly, is decreasing. I am also certain the eastern seaboard of Africa, from Mozambique through Somalia, is the last great energy prize of the 21st century. Therefore, the control of the Indian Ocean becomes kind of decisive, and with control of it, China can be shut down quite quickly via distant blockade operations, of which I've spoken before. On that note, I'll put up a photograph of the captain of a dhow who took us to Wasini Island 766 days ago, and of course that ties in with the dhow, the escalator wind. And I'll also put up a photograph of the Indian Ocean taken 35 days ago at Southern Palms in Diani. I'll furthermore put up a link for Robert Kaplan's, a discussion by Robert Kaplan about his book Monsoon, the Indian Ocean and the Future of American Power, and a photograph from 1953 of dhows in the Mombasa harbour. And finally, a photograph of Fort Jesus 1,130 days ago, which is all about the ability of controlling the egress, entrance and egress into and out of Mombasa. 3 Chinese Coast Guard vessels spent more than 2 hours in the 12 nautical mile territorial waters of one of the Senkakus, which China claims and calls the Diaoyus, Japan's Coast Guard said. So we've still got tension in that area. China's State Oceanic Administration said 3 of its Coast Guard ships were patrolling territorial waters surrounding the Diaoyus Islands yesterday, according to the official state news agency Xinhua. On that note, I'll put up that photograph of the snake installation by Ai Weiwei at the Herschel. Imagine that snake is trying to pin China down, and China's trying to break out of that encirclement. He railed against the information war that the West has waged against Russia. It was just a line in Der Spiegel regarding the Sochi Olympics. And, indeed, a lot of people are invested in Sochi's failure. Currency markets, Euro 134.86 touched 134.79, which was the weakest since November 22. Expectations are that Draghi might cut again. Dollar index 81.30, that's pushed through that key level of 81.06. Japanese yen 102.32, and the strength of the yen, which is I think up over 5% this year, has crashed the Nikkei, which is down over 10%. Swiss franc 0.9071, pound 164.28, Aussie 0.8752, there is a rate-setting meeting due this week. Hans Kuhnen, a senior economist at St George Bank in Sydney, said, "I'm sure as much as anyone can be that the RBA will not be reducing rates. I think the text will confirm the current cycle of easing is over, and that could be positive for the Aussie." Indeed it could. India rupee 62.595. South Korean won 1082.54, Rial 241.26, Egyptian pound right just under 7 at 699.49, and the Rand 1115.38. But I remain of the view that we're going to get a 12 print this year. The euro has dropped 0.2% this year, according to Bloomberg correlation-weighted indices. The dollar's climbed 1.9%, and the yen is up 5.2%. The yen is the biggest gainer in the index. The MSCI All-Country World Index tumbled 4.1% in January. Standard & Poor's 500 Index slid 3.6%. Benchmark US 10-year notes rose, pushing yields down to 2.64%, which is the lowest closing level since November 7. Emerging market currencies continued a slump initially spurred by anti-government protests from Ukraine to Thailand and deepened by the Jan 23rd devaluation of Argentina's peso, which dented confidence throughout Latin America. The peso fell 13% that day and 19% for the month. The Turkish lira rose this week past versus all its global peers except the Malawian kwacha, gaining 3.6% against the dollar after its central bank more than doubled rates. Still, it plummeted 4.8% in the month. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index, and this is now making considerable headway. It looks as if it's going to keep on pushing. The euro dollar, the weakness in the euro dollar is really around the issue of inflation. Annual inflation was 0.7% last month after a 0.8% advance in December versus a 2% target for the ECB. Expectations are that Draghi might pull the trigger earlier than many expect. Dollar yen 102.32, I'll put up a 3-month chart of that. And also just mention that the Nikkei slid 2% today, and it's fallen 10% from a 6-year high reached on deck 30. Gold 45.355. You know I remain, I'm not constructive about gold. I think we're going to have a sharp sell-off at some point this year, and I look for a level to sell it at. Crude oil $97.28. I think that's overcooked to the upside. Prices are down 1.3%, and I think the key takeaway for me is the re-emergence of Iranian oil. That's going to dramatically change the supply-demand dynamic and bring prices lower. Emerging markets. From the point of view of emerging markets, the Fed has just said, "Hasta la vista, baby," said a fellow called Stephen Englander. The sell-off is going through classic phases. First it was vulnerable currencies like Turkey and South Africa, and now the market is looking for the next target, and I wrote about this, the big sharks in the water, they've smelled blood. Frontier markets, I like this photograph, a view of Havana from Castillo del Morro. Tell me if you do as well. Coming to Africa, the General says more Marines could be based throughout Africa. Marine units that specialize in crisis response could be based in Africa in coming years as military leaders work with host nations that have shown interest in the US posturing troops in their countries. According to a top general in the region, Lieutenant General Stephen Hummer, deputy to the commander for military operations in US Africa Command, said these units would likely be similar to the Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force Crisis Response based in Spain, which stood up in 2013. There's quite a reach from Moron, that's in Spain, to get to certain African countries, depending upon the operational aircraft, as we look at the future of the environment around the world and the fiscal challenges impeding the number of ships we would like to have. There's a balancing act we have to achieve between MAGTFs, abroad ships, and MAGTFs ashore, where they can respond to indications and warnings. The units likely would be a hybrid between the Crisis Response Force and a second Marine unit that operates in the region, which is based at the Naval Air Station in Italy. Those Marines conduct training with local militaries that are dealing with terrorism or other threats to security. And essentially, I've been speaking about this for a while. I've been saying it's all about the insertion of hard power, with which you can tilt the page, and the US, of course, remains the one country with the biggest hard power capacity across this continent. I put up a photograph of the newly appointed AU chair and Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz. The AU Commission Chief Dlamini Zuma confirmed 9 nations had promised to say. This is another interesting piece of news. The AU is saying that they have in principle set up a permanent standby African peacekeeping force. She said, when crises break, it costs us much more the longer we wait. If there could be a quick response, maybe we could save lives. I tend to agree with this comment of the UN Deputy Secretary General Jan Eliasson. A very big problem for the AU is, of course, financing their operations, calling for more action to bolster standby capacities. And I agree with that. Eliasson also said the cessation of hostilities is not holding 100% in Sudan. The South Sudan situation is like a wound. When there is a risk of an infection, and that spreads and this becomes a regional issue, it is getting more dangerous. President Mugabe, who turns 90 years old next month, was elected first vice chair of the influential AU Executive Council. The appointment makes him eligible for the chairmanship of the AU in 2015. Arthur Gwangwa from the Zimbabwean Human Rights NGO Forum described the developments in Africa as theatre of the absurd. He told SW Radio Africa on Friday that the move is an indication of Africa's belligerent attitude towards the West. Africa wants to confront Western countries, and what better way than to put Mugabe in the leadership? This will give him a more powerful voice and a pedestal to shout at the West. Interesting piece about Africa's energy gap in the FT, that's the subscriber issue, and it's saying, a new report by EcoBank says, the power gap in Africa is just so huge. It's an interesting article. South African oil shares down 2.36% this year. Dollar versus rand, I'll put up a 1-month chart. I think we're going to see 12 at some point this year. The Egyptian pound just below 7. The Egyptian stock market, best performing stock market in Africa, up 9.7% and at an April 2010 high. Nigerian oil share down 1.83% in 2014. Ghana Stock Exchange has rallied 5.14% in January and is at a record lifetime high. Starwood Capital's Louvre plans as many as 16 new Africa hotels, saying demand is rising, African growth creates wealth and traffic, and boosts the development of the hotel trade. Africa offers opportunities which no longer need to be demonstrated, he said. Angola plans a 20-year Kwanzaa bond sale to boost the capital of its central bank. I'm sure that will be well received. Angola pumped 1.48 million barrels a day in January, second to Nigeria only on the continent. Coming to Kenya, gunfire erupted as police raid radical Kenyan mosque in Mombasa following a raid by armed police who had received a tip-off that Muslim youths were being radicalized and trained for militant attacks. Raid sparked violent protests inside the Masjid Musa Mosque In Mombasa's run-down Majengo neighborhood and in the surrounding streets, police fired tear gas and live rounds over the heads of taunting crowds who hurled stones back. Breaking up Islamist militant networks among its Muslim minority has become a priority for Kenya as it tries to end attacks by Somali militants and their sympathizers, bent on punishing it for sending troops to fight Al-Shabaab rebels. They attacked our mosque, but they're not going to kill our spirit, one youth shouted. Jihad is the way to go. Mombasa's police chief Robert Kitua said the raid followed a tip-off when his officers burst into the mosque where radical clerics regularly preach. They came under gunfire. We found them engaging in radicalization and training of youths. Kitua said ringleaders shielded themselves behind children and infants, the first time he had seen such a tactic used. Police seized black banners emblazoned with jihadi slogans, laptops, DVDs during the raid. Outside the mosque, shoes, tear gas canisters, and spent bullet cartridges were strewn on the ground. Worshippers at the Masjid Musa Mosque accused the security services of operating a death squad, a charge the police deny. Kitua said the security forces had arrested more than 100 people during Sunday's clashes, and 2 officers had been wounded. One policeman was found sprawled in a pool of blood in a bathroom inside the mosque and was in critical condition. We found him locked up in a bathroom after we heard him groaning. It appears like they slaughtered him. I'll put up a photograph that I found of the Masjid Musa Mosque in Majengo and a picture from Al Jazeera of the mosque that they have posted on their website. I wrote about this on September the 3rd, 2012, when I said the Swahili coast is a potential tinderbox from Lamu through Zanzibar and all points in between. And I said then we need to craft a roadmap that effects economic trickle-down, because whilst all our eyes were turned towards the Rift Valley, the Pwani has been simmering and it needs our full attention. On that note, I'll put up a photograph of the sunset in Mombasa 36 days ago and a picture of Mombasa Island taken from the Nyali side that I took 38 days ago. Competition pushes India's SR Group to sell stake in U Mobile. Latest reports suggest the price will be $100 million and Bharti Airtel may be bidding. Pakistan's MCB Bank is on the verge of acquiring Kenya's Middle East Bank at an undisclosed fee, and that will continue to confirm the activity we're seeing in the banking sector. We are meeting the company executives at Indaba. These are solvable issues that we plan to finalize in South Africa, but the final agreement will be signed here in Nairobi, said the Minister Balala. If the talks are successful, the export license could be issued as early as next week, setting Kenya up for its first rutile export of 100 tons. Mr. Balala provoked the standoff in August last year when he doubled the royalties for mineral sands from 5 to 10%. The company had, during the Kibaki administration, negotiated royalties of 2.5% in the first 5 years of operation. This would have risen to 5% for the rest of the mine's life. I wrote that piece on the 27th of January saying mineral export license holdup could hit planned Eurobond. And I was saying Base Titanium invested more than $300 million in Kwale at the port on the basis of an investment agreement signed with the government of Kenya. Subsequent to the signing of the investor agreement, the minister has, via a Gazette notice, introduced a high royalty regime. If the Eurobond market, and the Eurobond market is a killer shark, smells that we're discarding our legally binding agreements that we play fast and loose with our signature, then this Eurobond is not going anywhere and is dead in the water. The blowback from a fumbled Eurobond is just unconscionable, I said. I'll put a photograph up of the mine site at base in Kwale, I took 33 days ago, and a photograph of the bareback tree where Nema have requested that they preserve that tree, and it's indeed a beautiful one. Bid Investment Company is a subscriber shareholder in a new investment vehicle, Vanya Investment Pool Limited, which was formed for the purpose of making a competing takeover bid in RVP. According to Musti Mamuji, one of the minority shareholders in the land-rich Sisal firm, the company is worth 11 billion shillings, translating to 200 shillings per share, he says. I'll put up a link for the share price data via Vipingo, and you can also study the full year results which were released recently. And refer you back to the article I wrote, The Bidding Wars, the Robinhouse versus Centum. And there I'd sort of calculated the price per acre. You can have a look at that. Dubai-based Al Futtaim was on Thursday still seeking the support of CMC shareholders owning 6% to complete its takeover of CMC. TransCentury issued a cautionary announcement on Friday, and it's interesting what it says. Would like to announce that its wholly owned subsidiary company, Safari Rail Company Limited, has exercised an option that will result in a change of its shareholding in KU Railways Holdings Limited. The transaction is in line with the group's overall strategy to maximize the value of its investment for its shareholders, and it's not clear whether they're exercising a put or a call. On that note, I'll put up a photograph of the Mombasa Nairobi Railway that I took not too long ago when I was there over Christmas. Interesting article on Business Day Live, Kenya Railway Project putting China's business model on trial. Well worth a read. Interesting article we have there. And saying that, what seems to be on trial here is China's style of doing business in Africa. And I'd agree with that. Kenya shilling is softened 86.518 last. The Nairobi All Share is now down 1.46% this year. Fell 6.85% over 5 sessions last week. Let's hope we can arrest that and turn that around today. The NSE 20 is down 1.44% this year, fell 235 points and 4.618% over the 5 sessions of last week. There is a link where you can check any listed share price at the Nairobi Securities Exchange on Rich Wrap-Ups. If you scroll down, you'll find it. And finally, I like this photograph of the sunrise over the Mara River as seen from the Olakira camp by a fellow called John Becker. I wish you a great week. And once again, I appreciate the fact that you take time to come and stop by.